Explosive revelations, big names dropped from members of parliament to ministers, big business and to criminals. No one was spared. That's how deep the rot goes. And that's according to KwaZulu-Natal National Police, or KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner rather, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, who was giving evidence and testimony before the Madlanga Commission, where he painstakingly detailed political interference in the work of the police, accusing senior government officials of giving questionable instructions and meddling in police operations. Mkhwanazi said this at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, established by President Cyril Ramaphosa to investigate serious allegations of criminality, political interference and corruption within the South African criminal justice system. The inquiry, which made officially commenced its hearings and business, has passed this past Wednesday, is chaired by retired Acting Deputy Chief Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga. Mkhwanazi delved deeper on the KwaZulu-Natal political killings task team and what he said to be a criminal syndicate operating within law enforcement and the criminal justice system. For analysis on this, we are joined by a panel of guests: legal analyst Benedict Phiri, political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng, and crime analyst Professor Chris the Kock. We're also going to be speaking to communications scholar, and that is Makhadi Tshamano. My apologies for that. Before we get into that panel discussion, let's have a listen at these opening remarks made by Mkhwanazi at the inquiry.
The allegations made by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi on 6 July 2025 concern a grave subject matter, the subject of the alleged infiltration of or exertion of undue influence on the criminal justice system. If the allegations are proved to be true, that spells doom for South Africa's criminal justice system. A healthy criminal justice system is key to the rule of law and, in turn, to a functioning constitutional democracy. With a criminal justice system that is populated by malleable and corrupt functionaries, many criminals, especially those holding positions of influence, will rarely, if ever, answer for their criminal deeds. Also, malleability, corruption, and dysfunctionality in the criminal justice system are at odds with what we, South Africans, expect of and are entitled to from a criminal justice system. At the center of any functioning constitutional democracy is a well-functioning criminal justice system. If you subvert the criminal justice system, you subvert the rule of law and constitutional democracy itself.
Commissioner, on this paragraph level, it has been my aim that I want to demonstrate that the criminal justice system has been subject to a continuous threat, as well as sabotage, which has been with us over an extended period, to a point where we believe it is at real risk of a total collapse if nothing is done. Therefore, an urgent and effective interventions are required in order to avert this outcome. And I believe this commission will stand to play a very important role in order to help us to prevent this total collapse of the justice system in our country.
Well, let's talk to our panel about this. Benedict, I want to begin with you. This is a very interesting turn of events in that Mkhwanazi's opening statement seems to be one that presents a collective voice and not a singular voice. He often referred to his statement as the input of the collective of law enforcement in KwaZulu-Natal. And he often used the term we, us, and our in reference to his position, his view, and that of that reflected in his opening statement. And of course, that language was used throughout his testimony over the first 3 days. On that opening day, what was contentious is whether or not he can submit evidence on behalf of a collective, given that that draws a very precarious line between what is first-hand testimony and first-hand evidence, and as well as hearsay evidence. In a court of law, you can't present evidence on behalf of a collective. Each person speaks for themselves because only one person takes the oath at each time that takes place. How much of what Mkhwanazi said will actually be admissible, and how much of it do you think will become contentious in cross-examination?
Good afternoon, Oliver. Good afternoon to the rest of the panelists and the viewers. Just to sort of contextualize the process that the Commission is following, we know that there's part one of the Commission, which will essentially entail General Mkhwanazi and others setting out the detail of this criminality and corruption and interference in the SAPS as we've seen now. So as he's been speaking, he's obviously made reference to particular exhibits, he's made presentations, he's also implicated particular people, he's mentioned names, and as that's going along, what you're going to then see in part two of the Commission is then people that have been implicated will then have a chance to respond to what General Mkhwanazi has put and others that will be able to put in this part one. So in that process, you will then have a series of corroboration of General Mkhwanazi's submissions, or rather, let me say allegations, because other people will then bring documentary evidence that may or may not corroborate what is put there. And the third part of the inquiry will then include General Mkhwanazi then replying to whatever may have been rebutted. So I think the process that has been set out is a robust process to sift out evidentially what actually is true and what is not, because it does give all parties an ability to put whatever is put on the table. If people need to be called to bring affidavits or evidence, the Commission has those tools at its disposal through subpoenas, etc., and a bunch of notices that they can issue. So I think for now, what General Mkhwanazi has done is he's given us his best evidence to substantiate what he's told us as a country. The evidence will unravel as the Commission unfolds. And in that context, then we'll be able to assess which evidence is more probable and to be believed as opposed to others.
Yeah. Asanda, I want to stick around this concept of the collective voice, so to speak, that Mkhwanazi used throughout giving testimony. And he was quite adamant about speaking about we, us, and our. But he also draws a very clear line between it is us against them, them being the criminal syndicates, which is inclusive of office bearers, ministers, members of parliament, big business, as well as elements in the media, for instance. And he often speaks about us versus them in very subtle tones. But the political implication of it seems to be that we're taking on the political hegemony, no matter how powerful they are. Talk to me about what the political fallout of that could potentially be if the political establishment attempts to either respond as a collective voice themselves or to distance themselves individually from the testimony of General Mkhwanazi there.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's very interesting what has been happening in the sense that there are implications of media, of the judiciary, and of politicians and political principles. And there also are allegations that all of these different members of, the various estates within the political system have been using and abusing power and colluding towards protecting criminals, and that is the biggest allegation. And I think what's also interesting that's coming up is the fact that there seems to be a very specific refusal to buckle down by civil society, not civil society members, sorry, by civil servants. So there seems to be various members of the police, both at a senior and a junior level, who are saying that this is our job and this is what the country has basically given us the ability to protect, and we refuse to buckle down. And now what happens when you have political principles and civil servants fight is that it creates a very awkward position where the leadership is political and the civil servants are the ones who have to execute their duties. So it's going to be interesting to see how the police ministry is going to continue, both in terms of you've got a new minister that's come into play, and he has to do the job of giving instructions to these civil servants who are very clear on where they stand and what they will and won't allow. And I think the political fallout is going to be big, because South Africans right now, if you go on any social media, are firmly behind Mkhwanazi and those who he says are in his corner. And this means that while it's a good thing, because South Africans are trusting and going to be trusting of essentially civil servants who are executing their duty in ways that we don't often see, sadly, there's also a sad thing that's happening wherein their lack of trust in political principles, their lack of trust in the political system of the country, particularly because it's not just politicians that are implicated, it's also media, it's also members of the judiciary, and also members of various other entities that are meant to be servicing or protecting South Africans, which are being alleged to have done the opposite in order to allow criminal enterprises to continue to operate, particularly in Gauteng. And so I think looking at this election that's coming up, even though it's a municipal election and a local election, the ANC is definitely going to bleed votes as a result of what's coming up, particularly because he's saying it's been 20 years.
I do want us to come a bit back to that a little bit later on to speak about whether or not political parties either gain or lose from the moment there. So I'm going to put a pin in that. I just want to stick to this concept about the collective just for a second. And perhaps to bring you into the conversation, Makhadi, the collective voice. Do you think that Mkhwanazi strategically chose to speak as though he's speaking on behalf of a collective? Let's call it the good cops in the system. And do you think that there's a psychological effect that is positive that the collective voice carries?
No, certainly. I think it does come up as if he's speaking on behalf of the collective. But I think one must also, taking into account the fact that he has over the years, I think, became very popular. So to a certain extent, it might sound as if he is speaking on behalf of himself. Obviously, there are different theories in all that which he has presented. If you were to track back this to the famous press conference on July 6th. So some obviously already suggesting that he is protecting himself. There are a number of, theories. But I think what is of importance in all of this is the fact that he has brought to light certain things which I think South Africans would not have known about. And I think the Commission on its own, it's a great opportunity, great platform to ventilate all of these, issues. And obviously, from the last 3 days that we have been listening, or watching the Commission as it, progresses, but a number of institutions and individuals that are implicated, it will be interesting to then see what then happens. And most certainly, with the names that have been implicated, I'm sure it is now really up to the hands of those that are in charge of the Commission to see how best they may want to bring some of those people that are implicated to share light on some of the issues that have been raised.
Yeah. Dr. Crystal Kock, let me bring you in here. Day one focused quite heavily on testimony around the work of the political killings task team. We learned a great deal about its mechanics and its operations. And I think it brought to light not just failures, but also successes, right? One of those being that we learned that part of the efficiency of the political killings task team was the fact that it had a special relationship with the NPA, in that it brought prosecutors into the investigation process, and they were part of the investigation team and process as the investigation happened, as opposed to what is the norm and standard, which is the police investigate, build the case, hand it over to the NPA review and decide then if they want to prosecute. It seems to have been done the other way around here, in that the NPA was part of building the case from the start. That seemed to prove wholly efficient, in that cases were brought much quicker and, of course, prosecuted with a lot more credibility and precision. And that was one of the successes that we learned about. How much of that do you think should reflect in the report ultimately about what needs to change reform-wise in how the police and law enforcement and, of course, the NPA work all together?
Yeah, I think that should definitely be reflected in the report. And clearly, it is a success story if you can do it in that way, so that your prosecutors and your detectives and even intelligence can walk together and plan together and come up with evidence which will stand in court, which will succeed in a conviction or convictions. So I think they will definitely have to learn a lesson from that. And so I think that was a good thing. I just want to also say that I think this 3 days, the General Mkhwanazi actually put a picture, but not a full picture, but a quite a robust picture on the table. And now many of the names that he mentioned will have to come. And why I think he also referred to a collective, it's not his own work. I mean, he referred to the task team, he referred to General Khumalo, to intelligence, and other people. So I think that's why they see it as a collective. Now, all of these will be called to the commission in all probability. And then we will see what parts of this picture that the general put on the table will still stand and what will fall.
Yeah. Perhaps to consider this, and I think it's an important part of the contextualizing of the strength of the testimony, is Mkhwanazi's own credibility. Asanda, when the testimony began, what we heard there was Mkhwanazi having to speak about, or being asked by the evidence leader to speak about his own CV, for instance, the work he's done in the police service, how long he's been doing it, the different functions he's had throughout his lifespan in the police service, which of course started in 1993. That means he's been in the police service for 32 years now, just about. And of course, later on, part of the conversation around his credibility, he, for instance, spoke about the time he struggled to work as acting National Police Commissioner under then Minister Natim Tetwa. He then says he approached President Jacob Zuma at the time and said, I am resigning because I can't work with this man. We have a difference of opinion. There was seemingly an attempt by Natim Tetwa at the time to interfere with an active and ongoing investigation. And Mkhwanazi said, I will have no part of this. And he chose to resign from the police service at the time. And that seems to want to lend towards his credibility as well. How much of his credibility matters here, one, and how much of it itself will be on trial and litigated?
Well, I think, that's why they started with laying the groundwork for who the man making these allegations is. And I think it was important that he spoke particularly about his prior foray into national leadership in 2011. And I think that because of this, he was able to paint a picture that then allowed people to understand that this is not the first time that he's facing this level of corruption. And it's not the first time that he's seeing this political interference. And it gives us the background that we needed in order to understand why he felt it was important that this time he went as far as doing the press conference in order to take the nation into his confidence. And I think it's quite smart the way that he has laid out his testimony, particularly from a perspective of ensuring that South Africa continues to trust the police force and understand that while there are at a senior level lot of alleged to be corrupt people, there are also good people in the police force, because if he had, framed his engagement in a different way, it could have led to there's no need to, listen to any police officer or try to follow the laws of this country because everyone is corrupt.
Yeah.
But he's done it in a way where he's constantly reiterating that there are many of us who are working hard to ensure that criminals don't win the day. And we are doing our job as civil servants despite the political interference and despite the abuse of power by political principles, which is important for democracy and for South Africa's continued trust.
Benedict, how much does the credibility of a witness matter in a process like this?
It matters a lot. And also the public nature of the process. I think the history of General Mkhwanazi, as he's testified to as a career policeman, essentially, will stand him in good stead. And, any aspect that he believes could have been an issue, he's invited those people that have made allegations against him to come and lay what they have to lay at the commission. So it will stack up, it will serve him in good stead. He's been frank, he's been open, he's been honest. And I think what's also important, just back to that he's shown that he stands for the values of the Constitution. He's ultimately standing in defense of our constitutional democracy. And I think that lends a very positive lens when, his evidence will be assessed when others have to say whatever they have to respond to what is laid on the table, because we'll also have to assess their credibility, to see which is most probable between the versions.
Yeah. Let's move on to day 2 of testimony at the commission. And this is where things got really interesting. Fadil Adams of the National Coloured Convention, as well as Diane Koch-Barnard of the Democratic Alliance, were among some of the names mentioned by KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi during his testimony this past week. On Thursday, Mkhwanazi also said that former Police Minister Benedict tried to interfere in the disciplinary process of a top-level crime intelligence officer, that would be General Khan. Let's take a listen at some of the testimony from day 2.
Ms. Koch-Barnard is a veteran in Parliament as a lawmaker who ought to understand what belongs where in Parliament. And I can confirm, commissioners, that she is appointed by her own political party, which is a Democratic Alliance, to be a member of both the Portfolio Committee on Police that deals with the open account, as well as being a member of the Joint Standing Committee of Intelligence, which deals with the COVID funds. So she's better positioned to call the department to come and account at the right platform. But we have seen, and I said when I started, I'm going to throw one example of each. I'm not going to go into details with many. There are many examples. But she's one of the leaders in our legislature that is participating in both breaking the law as well as fueling these malicious attacks that are happening within crime intelligence, and ultimately directed at Khumalo as the head of that intelligence. As we investigate, as I said before, that we get an evidence of something and we try and connect this with something else, and we start seeing a different picture. Mr. Adam, despite the fact that he leveled these complaints against these individuals at crime intelligence on the 29th and the 31st of October, respectively, in 2 different police stations, 2 different provinces. The following day, then he sends a complaint to the minister. The outcome of that complaint seems to not resolve or address what they want to achieve, or what he wants to achieve. In that, the National Commissioner's Office, the inspectorate in the police through the National Commissioner's Office is asking for additional number of days, which is another 10 days. The minister receives this and he acknowledged this on the 8th of November. 2 days later, Mr. Adams sends another email, now with a different content, same complaint, but now he believes this time around. He is talking to what the National Commission has done, but yet he has not been able to engage with the inspectorate. So I don't know how is he privy to the National Commission's report that is directed to the minister. But he seems to address, now he is including the National Commission now, that the National Commission himself is wrong with regard to how he's handling the vetting issue of Khumalo and so forth.
Well, that was the testimony there on day 2 from the commission. Very interestingly, Benedict, I want to bring you in here. We hear about Fadil Adams, a member of parliament, who, for some reason, some inexplicable reason, has access to privileged information from crime intelligence. We later learn, speculatively at least on day 3, that it might be because General Khan, who is the head of crime intelligence, might have a special relationship or might have leaked this information to Fadil Adams, Member of Parliament. And then we also learn of Diane Kock-Barnard, a member of the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, who has access, as a member of that committee, to privileged information of crime intelligence that is classified in its nature. And of course, it's important for it to be classified because the work of crime intelligence is generally clandestine and surreptitious. Both these people have made public information which ought to have been, which is classified information, ought to have remained classified. What are the legal implications for both of them, if any of that is true?
Yeah, I think that, that's a very serious situation for somebody to be in possession of classified information when it hasn't been declassified. What I'm interested to see is, because the term for rapid or quick referrals, where there have been instances where the law is broken to the various criminal, like the NPA. So I'm interested to see, coming from these allegations, and obviously once people have been afforded an ability to respond to the allegations, whether if a criminal offense is identified by the commission, it can be referred to the NPA, and the speed at which it will be dealt with, because that is part of the mechanism of this commission.
Yeah. Dr. Krista Kock, did Fadil Adams and Diane Kock-Barnard compromise crime intelligence by using what is classified information? In the instance of Diane Kock-Barnard, she had access to that information as a member of the committee, and in the instance of Fadil Adams, he seemingly was given that information. He's not a member of the crime intelligence network. Did they compromise the work of crime intelligence by making what is classified information public? Yeah,
it can compromise intelligence and crime intelligence specifically. They are not under law. They can't make that public. I'm a little bit, I don't know in the case of Diane Kock-Barnard, MP, if she's still, because I've heard an interview with her where she said she's not a...
So go ahead, Chris.
Where she said she's not a member of the Joint Standing Committee of Intelligence in this administration, that she was in the previous. That's an interview that I heard. So I'm not 100% sure if she's a member. But even if not, classified information stay classified information, and it have to be declassified to be used for other purposes.
Asanda, does Parliament have mechanisms to hold these two members of Parliament accountable?
I think it does. I mean, I think there are various transgressions that have taken place ethically, if we are to believe what is being claimed, that Parliament will have to deal with under its own kind of procedures for members who have acted unethically. I think that often in South Africa, people struggle to separate between kind of trying to speak out and being a whistleblower and actually acting in ways that are unethical. And when you disclose classified information, particularly without checking to ensure that the information you're going to disclose is not going to have an impact on ongoing investigations, it's a very dangerous thing, because by virtue of being in these committees and by virtue of being in whatever place that gives you access to that information, that is privileged information, and you are in a privileged position, that then means that you have to be responsible in how you engage with the information that you received and how you distribute that information. And if what's being said is true, then they acted unethically, and they actually, acted in the opposite manner of it was not in the best interest of South Africa, and particularly those who they represent in terms of political parties, because South Africans do not want to see criminals get away with crimes because investigations had to be halted, or investigations were then kind of corrupted or disrupted because information was leaked. And I think Parliament is going to have to need to do some kind of training, particularly around how to deal with classified information and what the roles and responsibility of members of Parliament are, because members of Parliament are often just basically saying whatever in public that they shouldn't, because they have privileged access.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to thank you all for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. Benedict Phiri, legal analyst, Asanda Ngoasheng, political analyst, as well as Dr. Krista Kock, who's a crime analyst. We have lost our other guest who was with us on the program. That is Makhadi Tshamano, who's a communications scholar. Well, that's what we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. I really do appreciate it.